Hi, my name is Irene Ratayaki, and I'm going to show you how to solve the simplex minimization method according to George Denstedt. Okay, we are going to look over how to solve a linear programming problem using the simplex method. So, the first step is to rewrite the problem, inserting slack variables, and rewrite the objective function with a 0 on one side. So for our first constraint, we're going to insert the slack variable u to turn it into an equation instead of an inequality. For our second, we'll insert the slack variable w to turn it into an equation and instead of an inequality. We don't need to worry about these ones because they're included in the simplex method, but we do need to rewrite this and we want to move everything over to the left-hand side because we want a 0 on one side and we want the p to be positive in what we do. So, we have our initial table. This is our initial table with the number 5, 1, 0, 0, 28, then 4, 1, 0, 1, 0, 36, negative 5, negative 4, 0, 0, 1, 0. In initial table, we have our variables for finding tested across the top, and then each row is the coefficient of one of this equation. Last line is for the objective function. Now, we need to choose a pivot position. We go across the bottom row until we hit the vertical bar. And say what is the largest negative number, and that's when you choose our pivot column. Then I want to choose which row is going to the archive or break. So I'm going to take the numbers in the column and divided them into the numbers in the constant column, meaning the numbers on the far side, right? And I get 26. And the second row is 9. Now, which of those numbers are smallest of 9? Smallest of that is 4. And that's what chooses our pivot row. So the 4 is our pivot element. Now, the first thing to do is to use row operation to make that 1. So we're going to replace row 2 with with 1, 1 over 4, 0, 1 over 4, and 0. Row 2, which has an effect of dividing this whole row by 4, those getting a 1 right there is we end up 0, 17 over 4, negative 1, negative 3 over 4, and 0, 51. Second row is the same. And the last row will become 0, 11 over 4, 0, 3 over 4, 1, 45. Now, it may take a while to actually do this calculation with a fraction, but when we get to this part, we now repeat over again and I say which column on the bottom has the most negative numbers in that column. And dividing them into the numbers over here. So I have 51 divided by 17 over 4, which in the same is 51 times 4 over 17 gave me 12. 9 divided by 1 over 4 is the same as 9 times 4, give me 36. I choose that is the smallest, so this is my pivot element now. I need that to become a 1, and so I'm going to replace the first row by 4 over 70 times itself, which is the same as dividing by that numbers that's already there. So, end up with 0, 1, 4 over 17, negative 3 over 17, 0. $12. And everything else will stay the same. Now, for my last step, is still my pivot element, and now I need to give zeros everywhere else in the column. So, I need those to be zeros to make this 1, 1, 4 to 0. I'm going to do R3, R2 minus 1 over 4 R1. To make the negative 11 for 0, I'm going to do R3 plus 11 over 4 R1. First row is not going to change. the second row turn into 1, 0, 1 over 17, 21 over 51, 0. The last row, we have 0, 0, 11 over 17, 52 over 51, then 1. Now, we have completed this because we have no more negative numbers on the bottom row. And now we can read the following answers. Okay, every column that has just the single 1 and zeros everywhere else is going to give us a variable. So this is 1 in the x column, so it's going to be x equals something. It is all in the second row, so x will be, this is a 1, in x will be 6. In the y column, so, well, y equals something, it's 1 in the first row, so y equals 12. This is 1 in the p column, so it will be p equals something odd. It is in the third row, so p equals 78. P equals the column that do not have the single one followed by zeros, mean those variables are just declared to be 0. So, u is 0. U is 0 here. Okay, and we have our solution. The two variables and the value of the objective function for this linear programming problem. Now, going to another example of simplex method. This one is with a linear programming problem with the 3 variables. Meaning, we would not be able to solve it using the graphical method for simplex. We do the same thing, each constraint will get slack variable added in to make it an equal sign, and then objective function will be rewritten. So I'm going to be the V first one so I can get equality. And a U to the second one and a W to the third one, and then going to rewrite the objective function, bringing everything over to the left and writing the P last with a positive P. Okay, so now I can start my initial setup of the problem. Ten, 5, 1, 0, 0, 0. Maybe 2, 8, 0, 1, 0, 0, 2, and 3, 0, 0, 1, 0. Negative 3, negative 4, negative 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0. Now, the first thing to do is to decide a pivot element. So the pivot now column will be the column with the most negative number to decide between the rows. I'm going to take these numbers and divide them into this. 120 divided into 10 gets 12.2. 6 and 2 gives 3. And 105 into 10 gives 10.5. The smallest of these is 3. So, this is my pivot row and my pivot element. Next, I'm going to divide this whole second row by 2. Next, I'm going to divide this whole second row by in orders to getting 1 in that position. This is still my pivot element, and I want to get zeros above and below. So, for the first row, I'm going to do R1 minus 10 R2. The third row is R3 minus 10 R3. Then the row 4 is 4 plus 4 R2. The result is negative 22, 0, negative 35, 1, negative 5, 0, 0, 90. The row 2 is the same. 1, 4, 0, half, 0, 0, 3. And same as the row 3. No. So, this becomes one attempt. Negative 22, 0, negative 35, 1, negative 5, 0, 0, 90. Four, 0, 0, 0, 0, 3. The third row is 17, 0, negative 37, 0, 0.5, 1, 0, 75. So the fourth row is 7, 0, 15, 0, 2, 0, 1, 12. No negative number. No negative number left on the bottom, which means it's actually done. Every column that has just a single one and zeros is going to give me a value of a variable. So, y will equals to 3. Then v equals to 90. And w equals to 75. And p equals to 12. The other variables that don't have the unit column becomes 0. So, x is 0, z is 0, and u is 0. Alright, now that we have our simplex table, we're going to have to start row bar using it and actually lift up one little thing, and this is going to be something important on the left side. I'm going to put my slack variable. We could label this has to do with the profit function at the bottom. Okay, so the way that you go about doing the simplex, this row reduction of this simple table, what we first do, and I'm definitely going to do at least one other example or a couple other example. But what you do is you look at the bottom row, and look at the most negative number. So we've got negative 7, negative 8, negative 10. You can think about which of these would be the farthest of the left on a number line. And to me, it's going to be negative 10. Okay, so this is going to be important. This is now we know as our pivot column. Okay, now what we have to do is these two numbers, we're going to make into what it's called a pivot, and the way that we decide it is we take the constant that's hanging out on the right side. So, in the first row, we've got 1,000. I take 1,000 and divided it by whatever number is in that column. So, divide by 2. 1,000 by 2, 500. I do something on the second column. Something for the next one, I take 800 and divided by it by 2, that's going to be, give me 400. Two, 400. What we do is, we use this, we pick the smaller of the two numbers. If they're equal, it doesn't matter which one you use. But in this case, certainly, 400 is the smaller than 500. These two that's located in the third column, second row, that's going to be our pivot. Okay? So our goal at this point is, we have to make this, instead of a 2, we're going to make it into the number 1. Well, the way that we can turn this into the number 1, this is where we have to start. Doing our new operation is simply going to take 1/2 of row of row 2. Okay, so I'm just dividing everything by 1/2 in my second row. So let me rewrite. One half, 1/2, 1, 0, 1/2, 0. My first row is going to stay just like it is. 2, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0, 0, and 1,000. Now, if you do my row operations here of taking 1/2, the second row is, I'm going to get, well, 1/2, 1/2, then I'll get positive 1. I still have a 0. Divided by 1/2 is, 1/2 will have 0. 8,000. Divided by 2 is going to give us 400. And again, we're just leaving that last row alone. So, I'm going to drop those numbers down as well. We've got -7, -8, -10, 0, 0, 1, and 0. Again, I should label my S1 and S2 over here on the right side. My goal at this point now is, I want to make, so again, this is still my pivot element. My goal is to make everything above and below that pivot element into 0. Okay, so I want the 2 to turn into a 0. I want a -10 to turn into a 0. The way that we can do this, we will have to do two things. So to make the first row, to make that 2 into a 0, I'm going to take -2x and the second row and to that first row. That's going to give me my new first row, and then to make the negative turn into a 0, I'll have to take 10 times in the second row. And that to the third row. And that's going to give me my new third row. Alright. So, the other thing to notice, we've got an X sub 3 in this column. We've got an S sub 2 over here on the left when we perform the pivot operation. There is S sub 2 is going to get replaced with an X sub 3. And this is going to have some importance at the end when we actually go to interpret our answer out. For how just know that you basically whatever your slack variable was that you start off with, that's going to be replaced with a variable from the column. So, okay, let's see if we can do this row operation we've got. Negative 2 R2 plus R1 from row 1. Then, 10 R2 plus R3 in row 3. So, we've got x1, x2, 3, x1, x2, 20. My second row is not going to change, so I like to go ahead and put that down. We've got 1 over 2, 1 over 2. I've got positive 1, 0, 1 over 2, 0, and 4,000. So now I'm going to do my first step in going to take negative 2 R and R2. And add it to the perfect row to give you my new first row. So I take first row. So if I take negative 2 times 1/2, that's a negative 1. Negative 1 plus 2 is positive 1. Again, now I have 1 over 2 times negative 2 is negative 1. 1 plus 3 is positive 2. If we take negative 2 times 1, that will give me negative 2 plus 2 will give us 0. And that's what we wanted. 0, 0 times anything is 0 plus 1 will be 1. If we take 1 over 2, negative 2, that will give me negative 800. Negative 800 plus 1,000 is going to be positive 200. So now, negative 1, 0, sorry. We've got positive 200. So now we've completed this first row operation. The next thing I'm going to do is to do 10 times in the second row. Add that to the third row. To give you my new third row, so very labor intensive here. Let's see, 10 times 1 over 2 is 5. 5 plus negative 7 is negative 2. We take 10 times 1 over 2, which is positive 5. 5 plus negative 8 is going to be negative 3. 10 times 1 is 10 plus negative 10 is going to be 0. 10 times 0 plus 0 is 0. 10 times 1 over 2 is 5. 5 plus 0 is 5. Well, have 0 plus 1, which will still be 1. We take 10 times 400, that's going 4,000 plus 0, that will be giving me positive 4,000. Okay, so we've now done one of our sort of now reduction steps. Now, we do is we look at the bottom row. If there are any negative numbers left over, it means you have to perform this pivot operation again. Okay, so again, we take the most negative or the one to the farthest to the left on a number line is, in this case, negative 3. That's the most negative, thus is going to our pivot column. And now we have to do is same process as before. Okay, I have to take the numbers that's hanging out on the right. So we've got 200 and 1, have to divide it by the value in that column. So I'll take 200 over 2. Over 2 is 100. 200 divided by 2 will just give me positive 100. If we take 400, divide that by 1/2, that's like taking 400 multiplying by 2, which would give us 800. 400 multiplied by 2 got 800. So again, to pick up the smaller of these two values, certainly 100 is smaller than 800. Our pivot element is going to be sitting right here in the front row, the second row column. So again, what we're going to have to do is make this into 1 and get zeros elsewhere in the column. So I'll do that. So this is my last discussion. Thank you.